Okay, so anchoring. My boat is anchored. These other boats are also anchored. This concludes the anchoring seminar.
Thank you. That was useful.
Okay, let's see if I can remember everything I was going to talk about. So, speaking of, actually, you know what? Perfect opportunity. Can y'all see that boat coming to anchor? That blue boat?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to watch them, and we're going to see what they do. The correct method is, which they have done, I saw them do it while I was in the dinghy, do a couple circles, kind of check the depth, go through, figure out where you're going to anchor, then do a kind of a mock anchor, come up to it, look around, see if you're happy where all the other boats are around you. They're getting not too terribly close. Generally, if I want to anchor where I am now, I was here first, so they came in after. But let's say I'm coming in, and I want to anchor behind that white boat. So the channel is over here. So we're out of the channel, and there's shoal all over here. So I'm going to come in. I'm going to figure out where my tide's coming from, or my wind if there's no tide. Tide is stronger here, so I'm going to come up, nose into the
The tide
tide.
must be ripping because the wind's 5 knots from your stern?
More than that, I'd say it's closer to 8 on my stern. Most all of us are riding. Where is it? Most all of us are riding 12 anchors. So the current's keeping us nose to the current, but the wind's blowing us. So I'm going to come up. I'm going to do a circle, couple zigzag passes. I'm going to see what the depths are. I'm going to remember what the tide is. So if I'm at half tide, I've got to, let's say, I'm at 4 foot tide. If I'm at half tide, I got to remember that I'm either going to have 2 less feet under me in terms of depth clearance, and 2 more feet at high tide to account for scope. So I'm going to I figure out that, I've got plenty of room to swing in this area. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up. If I want to anchor in line, generally you'll kind of see how everyone's there's a line and then a offset line and then another line. So I'm going to swing up. I'm going to swing up behind him, give him maybe, 30, 40 feet. And this is East Coast anchoring. Best thing to do is check with the person, if you can, as you're doing your zigzags, if you see them come by in the dinghy. Hey, I'm going to anchor behind you. How much scope do you have out? How much chain do you have out? So if they've got out 100 feet and you put out 150 feet and you're 50 feet away from them, when the current swings, you're going to hit them. So you want to put out, either make sure you're far enough away if you're going to put out more, or you want to put out the same as them. So they did their kind of circling this. They figured out where they want to anchor. They figured out kind of where they want to set. So they're coming up nose into the tide because the tide's the prevailing force right now. And they're going to come up, and if they're doing what I would do, they come up about 40 feet behind that guy. Let's assume he has out 100 feet of cable because we're in about 20 feet of water here. That's about 5 to 1. Come up behind, set your hook, back down on it. That way, when you swing, he swings, you're still about 40, 50 feet, or however far you want apart. Generally closer to 100 is a little nicer. We're all spaced out very well through here. So in terms of spacing and cable, you generally want to anchor. I know West Coast is different because it's so deep. East Coast, you tend to want to anchor on at least 5 to 1 if you're on chain. If you're on rope with a little bit of chain, you really want closer to 7 to 1 to keep that holding angle, because the angle of the chain to the seabed determines how much you want to be pulling that anchor almost as straight along the seabed as you can. And the more up you pull, the more it's going to break loose, because when you pull it straight up, it doesn't have any holding power. It just lifts right out. So the more angle you can have, the better. That angle is your scope. So if you've got 10 feet of water, 5 to 1, 10 times 5, 50 feet out. Plus, you've also got to account for the height. You don't just go from the water, you go from where your bow roller is. So my bow roller is 5 feet up, 10 feet of water, 5 feet of bow roller, 15. 15 times 5 is someone better than math than me. Figure that out. 65, 70 feet.
Can I just interject
we'll
for a quick
round up.
second here?
Yeah, what you got?
Just like West Coast where it's deep, like I anchor in 30 to 50 feet is kind of my normal. No, you don't have enough to do that. And if you're putting out 5 to 1 in those places, you are going to hit people in the anchorage and people are going to be angry. 4 to 1 is pretty.
Like 3 to 4 to 1.
Just that. I mean, when it's stormy as fuck and I know the wind's not going to shift, I'll drop out another 5 or like 5 to 1. But
yeah.
In deep places, you can't get away with that kind of scope. Exactly,
yeah. East Coast is generally, most everywhere is you're anchoring in less than 20 feet. The shallower you are, the more, I forget the exact reason why, forgive me, the physics behind it, but on shallower water, you do want more scope to hang a better angle off the anchor. So we'll round up. See, they've rounded up now. They've dropped the anchor, and they figured out where they want it. And they're either letting the current blow them back, or they're backing down with the motor. You don't want to. I've had to fix a lot of people with this. They fouled their anchors. If you blow your clutch, let the anchor and chain out, hits the bottom. That's great. Now it's on the bottom. If you let out all 75 feet of chain in a pile on top of the anchor, it's not going to hold. It's going to wrap. It's less likely to hold. It's going to wrap up around the anchor. Things are going to get tangled. I don't care what anchor it is. If you dump a pile of chain on it, something's going to get hooked. I've unhooked Rachnas and Vulcans and Mantis. If it's got a roll bar, a delta, it doesn't matter.
I've definitely, unfortunately, had to do that before, and my good anchor will still wrap itself.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to lower till it hits the bottom, let out another 5 or 10 feet, and let the current start taking you back or start backing down against it. And as you back down, let out chain, let out chain, let out chain. Don't do what the couple that kept trying to anchor next to me and Beaufort did, and just keep dumping out chain while you're holding in reverse. See, now they're backing up against it. And see, I don't know if you can see, cable came tight, and it's bringing them forward a little bit. If you back up real fast, when you come up on the chain, 1, it's going to jerk everything. That's extra stress loads on your gear. And 2, it's going to the weight of the chain, and that spring force, if you have the snubber, it's going to shoot the boat back forward. You're not really going to get a good pull set against the anchor. You're going to shock it and take all the strain off. So you want to gently keep coming back until the cable has most of the strain, and then you want to put it in reverse and back it down. And really, you don't want to shock load, quickly pull, tug, yank, any of that. You want to just gently back down, pull it all tight, put it in reverse, 1200, 1500 RPMs, depending on what motor you have, maybe more if you feel like it. Whatever you feel like gives you a good set. And then gently, again, if you just come knocking it out of gear, especially if you've got a lot of chain out, the weight of that chain falling back in the seabed's just going to shoot you forward over the anchor again. So just gently ease back into neutral, knock it out of gear. What you want to do is, while you're still in reverse, come down here, grab your snubber, grab your chain, whichever, and you can feel if it's stiff, it's sturdy, if it's, not, if it's got a little strain on it, then it's chain's fixed, the anchor's not moving. If you can kind of feel it bumping and getting tight and the slack up, you can feel the chain as the chain is being pulled along the seabed, and the anchor as the anchor's being pulled along the seabed. If it's not buried right. So now what I do, and I know some people have different methods, whatnot, generally is I'll let my chain out, stop about, because I have about a 15-foot snubber, stop about 15 feet shy of what I want my length off the roller to be. I'll put my snubber on it. None of this chain doesn't stretch. None of this gear, and especially this. No heavy load should ever be on the windlass. No shock loads, just designed to pick chain up and let chain out. So you want to prevent all the weight of the chain, the weight of anchoring, keep it off of that. I have a big beefy chain lock up here, which helps hold the chain, but there's no stretching chain. It doesn't have any give. It's going to pull up, it's going to snatch, it's going to pull, it's shock loading. Don't want that either. So I take my snubber, it's 1/2 inch, 5/8 nylon. You want something stretchy. Some people use shock absorbers that you see in dock lines. I don't particularly care. But I'll take and put a rolling hitch. Some people put a rolling hitch on the chain. I've got a chain hook on there. There's all these special fancy high-end chain hooks. Somehow you want to attach the rope to the chain, let out however much your snubber is. Let's say it's 15 feet of snubber. That's going to absorb the shock load. But now you need to let out another 5 or so feet of chain. Even if your snubber's tight and your chain's tight, all the load of your snubber, stretch of your snubber, it's not going to do anything because the chain's going to have to about 15 feet of snubber. Let's say 15. That's what I do. 15 feet of snubber. You can let out another 5 feet of chain on top of it, because that way, let's see if you can see it here. See how my snubber is tight and my chain's kind of hanging in a loop. That way, my chain comes up tight. When I come up tight on the anchor, as the snubber stretches, the chain is still small. Snubber. Some people have a bridle snubber. I only have one bow cleat. If you have 2 bow cleats, another line comes back to here, and it keeps things centered, and it divides the load between the 2 cleats. That is better. Some people do 2 separate snubbers off each side, so if one falls off, the other's still on there good. I definitely see a lot of people just anchor like this with no snubber, and they wonder why the windlass rips out of the deck. That's not a joke. I worked with someone like that. He wondered why anchoring with no snubber, this whole thing came out of the deck.
The other thing that can happen with that is that you strip the worm gear inside the windlass. I have done this. Don't do that. They're expensive.
Yep, you can absolutely, you can destroy the internals of these. You can destroy the gypsy teeth itself. You can blow out the clutch. These things are expensive. Be very nice to them. We lower our anchor down. We back down away from it as we ease out our chain. Once we've reached our length, we put our snubber on. We let out extra chain so the snubber has room to stretch. We back the boat down gently until it comes up tight on the cable. Put it in reverse with a little bit of power. We feel our snubber, feel our chain, feel if it's holding tight or if it's bumping and grinding, getting tighter, getting looser. Then it's dragging across the bottom. Keep watching that until it comes up tight. And if it doesn't come up tight, pull it up, check it, go around, reset it. There's no shame in trying to re-anchor 3 or 4 times, because people will be more angry with you if you drag into them instead of anchoring 3 or 4 times. So we've got all that set. Now what do we need? Well, unless you're in a designated anchorage, which is not just a little marker on Navionics, there are Coast Guard designated anchorages, most of which are for commercial vessels, and we will not be anchoring it. So you need an all-around white light on vessels less than 12 meters, visible 2 miles away. So on most sailboats, that's going to be at your masthead. You should see this place at night. It's just a sea of white lights. We're also next to a mooring field. Some people turn their anchor lights on in mooring fields, some don't. I looked through coal regs and the CFRs, and I cannot find a definite answer on if a mooring field requires an anchor light. So I usually turn it on anyways, just to be safe. If you're over 12 meters, you're also required to show all your day shakes. That's your steaming cone, your anchor ball, none of us restrict, like the tugboats have to show. We don't have to show the fancy stuff. The only two boats in here with their day shapes up are that French boat right there. And when you are at anchor, and I am technically not 12 meters, so I'm like 6 inches shy, but better safe than sorry. If you have your anchor light on, your anchor ball up, not your hands in the way. If you have your anchor light on, your anchor ball up, you're anchored well clear of a navigational channel. Anyone who hits you is absolutely shit out of luck. They have no leg to stand on if it goes to court because you have done everything correctly. Even if you're less than 12 meters, just get an anchor ball and hoist it up. There was a incident in Puerto Rico, I believe, the Virgin Islands, somewhere down there. And one of the mini cruise ships came in, thruster got stuck, got out of control, came through, and just obliterated half the anchorage. There was video of it all over. The cruise ship's clearly at fault, except a lot of those boats didn't have their anchor ball up, didn't have anchor lights on, and so they only had to pay out to about half of the boats that were displaying the correct symbols, and the other guys were shit out of luck. Oof. Stupid, I know, but that's how it works. So, $28 from Plastic Mo, get one, or even just get a volleyball and spray paint it black, and name it Wilson. So we've anchored, we've set our correct shapes, turned off our navigational lights. A lot of folks will just anchor, throw the dinghy in, go straight ashore. Which I can kind of understand if you have a dog, but other than that, you haven't seen how the boat's going to swing. You haven't seen where it's going to go when the tide changes. Unless I really know the place, I really like to see how the boat's going to swing through a tidal change. And usually hopefully you're arriving near high, or if you have enough water, right after low or near low. So you don't have long to wait before current switches and the boat swings to anchor. But generally, I'm like to see how the boat is going to sit before I leave it.
Do you ever take bearings to make sure that you are not drifting?
Yes, yeah. Thank you. That's a good point. While you're still in reverse, while you're backing down on the anchor, if you want to make sure that it's not moving, I wish you could see it good as I can. Actually, there we go. See that big cross there? I'm going to look, let's say, between that big cross and, let's say, a bush down here on the shore. And if they stay in line while I'm backing, then I'm not moving. If they don't stay in line, then I am moving. So you'll pick like a marker over there while you're anchored. And you want to keep an eye that you're not moving. You go, all right, well, the cross is at either you can take a compass bearing, cross is at this angle, or you can get, a rough. The cross is there, port is here, and that red marker is over there. And then the shrimp boat pilings are back there, whatever you want to take. But if you find you can use other boats, but if they start dragging, you might think you are, or they swing funny on their anchors and whatnot. The other thing, too, is you've got to be careful anchoring near catamarans versus power boats versus bendy toys versus actual sailboats. Is something shallow draft, like that guy up there, that's a bendy toy. Something shallow draft, very light, is going to move at her anchor a lot. She's going to sit differently. She's affected differently than the wind and the tide. I draw a lot more. I'm a heavier boat. I am more affected by the tide than the wind, per se. So I'm going to sit, like I am, nose into the tide, over my anchor because the wind's behind me. Whereas the power boat that was over here, he's going to be sitting that way because the wind's blowing him that way, and he's not going to be as affected by the tide. Whereas catamaran's going to be kind of the same thing, not a lot under the water, a whole bunch above the water. It's going to be wind-driven. So we've anchored, put up all our signals, yada, yada. We're all in compliance. Boat's fine. We go ashore. We stay for however long. And now we're ready to leave. First off, get the dinghy on deck if you're going to. Take down your day shape, whatnot. Turn on whatever lights, yada, yada. This is not meant to pull you up to the anchor. You can hear when it bogs down, you'll hear another boat hauling up the anchor and just get on, get on, get on, get on, get on. You can just hear the windlass crying. This is not meant to pull you to the anchor. This is meant to pull in the chain. So you need to be motoring up to the chain as you're taking it up with this. This is just, you don't have to pull it by hand. This is not an actual power winch. There are a few that are, most are not. Now, a trick you can do, what I do, I don't know why I've uncovered that. I'm not going to pull my anchor up right now. Don't put the load on the windlass because it's not meant to take, it's not meant to be pulling a 20,000 pound, 22,500 pound boat up to the anchor. It's meant to pull up the chain and some of the anchor. Now, what you can do is, I'm going to draw in the air. The cable, the chain's laying on the seabed like this. It's coming from your roller down and laying on the seabed. So if you take up that slack and stop pulling before it comes up tight, because that's putting load on the windlass, if you just take up that slack and then stop, that weight of the chain falling back down will pull the boat forward a little bit. And then you take up that slack again, stop, the weight of the chain pulls the boat forward. You just kind of keep doing that. Because you also don't want to, these are not continuous duty motors. They don't want to run, you want to give them a break to breathe. You want to run them for a minute, maybe give them 30 seconds off, 30 seconds, give them a few seconds off, yada, yada. I was talking about that blue boat just anchored. They're already leaving in the dinghy. They didn't even set very well. So you can use that weight of the chain to cheat and pull yourself up to the anchor. The boat will build up headway, and you can just keep taking in the chain as you go. If you're by yourself or you have folks that you're taking folks with you that don't really know how to run the boat, it's a good way to be able to get up to the anchor, not have to have someone that back there at the wheel. If the current's really ripping, that doesn't always work. The weight of the chain's not, you'll reach the point where the weight of the chain's not enough to bring the boat forward. Then you've got to go back or have whoever's at the helm put the boat into gear ahead for a moment. Someone's laying on their horn. Put the boat into gear ahead for a moment and then knock it out of gear. You don't want to overrun the anchor because then now the windlass, you're trying to pull yourself backwards and it gets all different kinds of fucked up. But haul your anchor up. If you have wash down or brush, wash the chain off, yada, yada. You can let the anchor drag in the water if it's calm for a moment or two, while you're getting underway, wash itself off and then bring it up. If you're going for a day, whatnot, down the ditch, whatever else, just pull it up tight, lock the chain lock. Going offshore for a while, not a bad idea to put a lashing on it. Just something on a quick release, you can pull the tail and it's free to run. That way, if you do need to kick it over, you can, and it's free to go. That's generally it. And as far as single anchoring in a tidal area. What else?
I wanted to jump in about the anchor dragging thing. There's like anchor alarm apps and stuff you can have that for your phone that'll let you know if it's moving. It's a good thing to have active a lot.
Yep. A lot of those require you to have like a separate device to text you if you're ashore and you want it to alert you. But when I'm on the boat, I can connect my phone to my AIS, and my AIS has a really nice drag alarm on it.
I have just a basic app on my phone that it uses the phone GPS.
Yes.
And it just runs. And it's annoying as fuck when it goes off, but it works. So.
Yep. Yeah, I find a lot of them just go off even if you're well inside the range. Like I'll set 100 feet of cable, set a 200-foot radius, so I've got to move 100 feet before I'm near the alarm, and it still just keeps going off and off and off. I honestly don't use my anchor alarms anymore.
So with that, I think that's going off because it's losing GPS signal. So you need to set like some battery thing where it doesn't, get put into power save mode. I think that's what that is. Because I've had the same issue.
even on my AIS, but it doesn't happen. So I've just stopped fucking with it. I stay on the boat until I'm sure that it's not going anywhere before I go ashore, and then I stay. If the weather looks nasty, I stay on the boat.
I like it most. I don't use them when I'm gone, but when I'm just sleeping overnight and I'm expecting a blow to come through or something, and I know that the tide is going to switch. That's when I use them. So I am confident that if it resets or when it does reset in the middle of the night, it's going to be okay.
Yeah, I once, when I was in the Keys earlier this year, I woke up like a couple 100 feet away from shore, and I was way farther away than that when I went to sleep. So,
oh geez.
Yeah, that was definitely yeah. You better fucking use this shit, you fucking idiot.
So that boat that just went by, and let them get a little further away. You remember I told you about the sent you the picture of the boat with the two mini split condensers on the stern rail, on the stern arch, straight up like house HVAC condensers. Okay, well, anyways, that boat back there is a piece of shit. What they did, they came up, tried to set the anchor right behind me, and of course that didn't work. So he has, I think, a Bruce and like a Delta or something for his two anchors on the roller. And he came up and he dropped the first one, and he, got up the seabed, started backing down, and he backed down maybe 30 feet, and then he dropped the other one and backed up the rest of the way. So they're not spread on a V. They're not set on a swivel like a Bahamian mooring. They're not set fore and aft. Oh, that's the archaeological park just fired off one of their guns, and the fort's going to fire theirs soon, I think. So you can already see I can see, you probably can't from there, I can see 2 or 3 wraps in his chain already, and he's only been here a day. The tide's only switched a couple times. So he is going to have a snarled, huckled up mess when he goes to anchor. If you want to do what he's doing, make sure you do this one in the together. But you come up this way, set the anchor. That way, set the other anchor. Those are going to get all snarled and huckled up if you have tide changes too. That gives you better holding than 2 in a straight line. The best of all is, I don't know if you did this with Bahamian. It's a fore and aft mooring, kind of, instead of having the anchor off the bow and off the stern, though, because that's a lot of load if there's any sideward current, any sideward wind. You'll set one anchor back down further than you want to go, set the other anchor, come back up to the middle. That second anchor is on a shorter piece of chain or shorter piece of rope, and it's shackled to swivel that's attached to the chain on the first one. So you still only have one piece of chain coming up to the boat. That swivel stops the 2 from getting all snarled up together, and that limits your swing. It keeps you in a much tighter circle than swinging all around on a single anchor mooring. But it's a lot more of a pain in the ass to deal with. So where we are, there's a bit of tide. It's maybe a 2-knot tide current. Not too terribly bad. Relatively well protected. Well, relatively, that's the ocean over there. There's no fucking reason for him to have done the bullshit he did. So you can see kind of the thought process for anchoring. We're coming down the channel. There's an anchorage marked. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to look. I draw 6 feet. I'm going to stay well away from that spot. So I'm going to take, and that's whatever. So as long as I'm plenty far anchored away from it, I don't have to worry about that spot. Now over here, I'm very close to marsh and shore and whatnot. But the thing is, the current is going either northward like this or coming southward like that. So I'm always going to be hanging either in here or up over here in the deep spot. So you can get away with anchoring closer to, like on the edges of channels. There's a lot of boats anchored right here, even though that's the edge of the channel, and there's a whole bunch of docks and shoals right here. There's even boats anchored up here, because as the current is blowing you one way or the other, you're always staying kind of in this line. And you will kind of zigzag as the wind, at slack water or at slack tide, the wind will kind of blow you around. But also here too, you can see we're in this river section right here. So most wind is going to be funneled either that way or this way. Even at slack tide, you're still going to be kind of blown in the same direction that you would be hanging anyways. So we'll come down. We could probably cut through there, but for safety's sake, we'll go around the red. There were a whole bunch of other boats around here when I got here, so I did a few circles, found a deep spot, figured out where I wanted to anchor, set the hook, back down, did all of that stuff. Types of anchors and chain. You want at least a little bit of chain, even if you're doing a rope anchor cable. You still want at least a little bit of chain on it, because you need that weight to kind of help pull the anchor down into the mud or the bottom when it first sets. And that bit of chain helps keep the angle of pull on the anchor low, because remember that scope, that angle between the anchor, between the cable and the seabed is what keeps the anchor buried.
The bare minimum suggested amount of chain is the length of your boat. So
yeah, exactly.
Bare.
Generally, yeah, I would personally recommend no less than 50. Especially places like Charleston. I fouled my anchor twice in Charleston. There's stuff all over the seabed in the Bahamas and the Keys. There's reefs and rocks all over in coral heads. If you get your rod snagged in one of those, it's 15 minutes and it's cut through and you're drifting. So generally, you really want to have, I would say, is a minimum of 50 feet of chain. There's formulas you can find. I'll see if I can find them and post them if you want. I've got a copy somewhere for calculating, the windage of your boat and then how much force that's going to be applying on your stuff. For a boat's our size, between 35 and 45 feet, it's generally, I believe, around 1.5 to 2 tons, if I'm remembering correctly. So, size your chain accordingly and then go up a bit too. Most anchor manufacturers, when they're sizing their chain, or when they're sizing the anchors for what size boat you need, 90% of their customers are anchoring in lakes or rivers, or they're day hooking. They just want to set the anchor, have lunch, pull it up, go back to the dock, whatever else. So find your manufacturer's suggested anchor size. For my boat, Rockna recommends the 30 pound. So I got the 45, go up one size. But the other thing to remember is that Windlass dies. I heard someone saying yesterday, I'm walking around here, yeah, I wanted the biggest anchor my Windlass could carry. He's on a boat my size. He's got an 85-pound anchor. I cannot pull up an 85-pound anchor. If that Windlass goes, it's got to come up somehow. And it's a lot easier to haul it up by hand than it is to try and hook a halyard to it or hook a block and tackle back to the mast or do whatever other bullshit that I've had to do, because I have had to haul up a lot of anchors by hand.
So again, I have a 35-pound anchor on my boat. It's slightly small, but like my boat weighs half of what yours does. It's well within the recommended range. But anyway, it's not just the 35-pound anchor. It's and this is why I only have 50 feet of chain right now, because chain weighs 5/16 chain, which is what I'm running, weighs a pound per foot in the water.
Me as well. Exactly. If you have 75 feet out.
Place, but where I am, I'll often when I'm drifting out and I'm off the bottom, but I'm not. I'm drifting out into deep spots. I'm now in more than 50 feet of water, so I'm pulling that whole 85 pounds up every single pull. It's
Yep. And the weight of the chain as well is what helps hold the anchor as well, which again, 50 feet minimum. If you're anchoring, longer term, if you're day hooking, if you're just, go out, lunch, go back in, 10 feet of chain and whatnot, because you're on the boat the whole time. So with chain size, there's different types of chain. Look into it. The basics, there's G4, there's proof coil, which are like these long link weird things. You have to size, like get calipers and a micrometer. Get your calipers and micrometer, because you have to size the chain to the cathead. Because if these are different, not the cathead, the gypsy, if these are different sizes, this is going to slip, it's going to bind up, it's not going to strip, and it's going to jam the windlass up, it's going to take a finger off, it's going to break and take a leg off. This is all industrial equipment. Yeah, it's on my recreation pleasure boat. This is industrial equipment. This is like safety classes and stuff. Most people don't. I don't. Don't stick your fingers where you wouldn't stick your pecker. You gotta get your fingers in there. You gotta clear a jam. Take it off. At least it flows off the foot switch. If the switch is in the cockpit belt, so just set that there. Shut the thing off. Tell the person back there not to touch the new stuff. If they speed up, so if in there, they will do you've got your different sizes of chain. They need to be sized based on your the old version was triple B, which has now become G4. There's like G4, G7, and G10 are like the three most common. G7 each being stronger.
And high test.
Yeah, G4 high test. Basically, G4 is kind of the Honda Civic. It works great. It's not as strong as the others. It's less brittle, so you can see a link deforming or elongating before it breaks. And it's easier to regalvanize because the others get their strength from the heat treating process they go through. G4, you can have it regalvanized. Regalvanizing is a heated process. So you can have it regalvanized, not indefinitely, but a lot more than some of the others. Like G7, I believe you can only have regalvanized 2 to 3 times before you've damaged the heat treating and the temper enough that it's no longer really safe to use. Buy quality chain. Buy chain that's made in Germany, in America, in Canada, in Europe. Don't get the cheap stuff. $70,000, $100,000, $30,000 boat, all for saving $200 on chain, $400 on chain, washed up. There is always a boat washed up on the bulkheads of St. Augustine. The fact that there's not one right now means that there's one due, and I don't want to be that one. So buy good chain. And on the end of the chain, your anchors. There's different styles. There's your classic, your fisherman, or your kedge style. What you see Popeye has tattooed on his arm, and I do too. The 2 flukes and the crown and the stock. That's good for rocks and weed, and that's about it. That's about all they're good for. They're heavy, they're cumbersome, they don't stow well. There are a few models that break down into 3 pieces that you can stow in the bilge. I do want to get one of those. Then you've got your fluke style, your Danforth, your Fortress, your Navy style anchor, where there's 2 big fins on either side and they bury in the mud. And those have some of the best holding power in a straight line pull of any anchor. In a tidal area, if you get mud or a plastic bag or a piece of a stick or something in those flukes, when you swing to the anchor and the anchor tries to reset, I don't want to say more often than not, but very frequently that anchor will not reset because of whatever's jammed the flukes. Generally, it's buried like this. The boat swings the other way and it wants to flip over and rebury. And if it's got anything jamming it, it won't rebury. So they're great straight line pull. I keep a fortress on my stern as a kedge to pull myself off of shoals, pull myself out of the dock, whatever else needs doing. I wouldn't use one as a main anchor. I set it for a hurricane. Great hurricane anchor. I wouldn't use it to anchor on every day. Then you start getting your plow styles. You get your CQRs, which I still have one. I like it. I do like it. Your deltas, which were a knockoff of the CQRs, and then the knockoffs of the deltas. They look like a plow, like the drag behind the mule, 40 acres and a mule plowing up the earth. CQR I like more than delta because they have they swivel. The shank actually has a swivel in it, and it's get a name brand CQR because the pin in the 45 is about that big around. It's not breaking. I find that lets it bury easier. If it lands on its side, it resets easier. You can kind of swing to it before the anchor has to actually turn and rebury itself. The deltas, I've had a lot of issues. They lay on their side, on their back, upside down. They don't bury. The Rover has a delta. I tried to get it to set 5 times once in soft, like good mud, good bearing conditions. Could not get it to set. And I had to haul all 100 feet of 3/8 chain up by hand. It sucked. But they started, it's a plow. It's more designed to kind of churn up the earth than hold on to it. So you started getting the Bruce, which is like a claw kind of a scoop. And then the guy that designed the Rockna anchor is the guy that designed my boats. Peter Smith, God bless him. He designed the Rockna and the Vulcan, and now you have they're not knockoffs because they are quality, but they're different designs. The Manta, the Mantis, the other scoop style anchors. The Rockna and the Vulcan are his design. I have a Rockna because, well, they're a big scoop with a weighted tip, so the tip hits, buries, and then it's just this big shovel. Like, I don't know if you've ever stuck a shovel in the dirt too far and you can't get the sucker up. That's exactly what this thing's doing. They're the hot new stuff, and they're some of the best holding you can get is the plow style. Your Rockna, your Rockna, your Bruce a little less. Bruce is good in sand, but it's a very blunt tip on the Bruce. It looks like this, so it doesn't bury, it doesn't penetrate as well in hard bottoms. But your Rockna, your Vulcan, your Manta, your Mantis, Sarsa, Sierra, what's the one you have? Sakura, something like that. Yeah, that one.
I love it. I love it more than my old. Anyway.
So those are your anchors. So what I have set up, I'm supposed to have, actually this boat's designed to have 300 feet of chain in the bow. That's a lot of weight up at the bow. So I have 200 feet now. 200 feet of 5/16. That's the other thing too. The end of your chain, do not shackle it inside the locker. Put it on like 25 feet of like 1/2-inch nylon, something stretchy. So if that clutch fails, that chain lock fails, and all the chain goes running out, when it reaches the end, instead of ripping out the bow locker and being gone, it'll come up on that rope, on that line. That line will stretch, shock load, take the load. You might still have your anchor. Also, if you have to cut and run, instead of having to try and get a shackle loose, you can let the chain all the way out, tie a buoy to the end, throw the buoy over, and then just cut that line, and the anchor's gone. You can come back and get it later if you have to cut and run. So my setup is 200 feet, 220 feet, 5/16 G4, 45-pound Rockna. I have a swivel on it between the chain and the anchor. Same thing like the chain. Get something high quality. Get it with the name printed on it. Don't go to the hardware store and get the $10 galvanized whatever thing. Spend the money. It's anchoring gear is your boat's insurance. The hell with actual insurance. This is your real insurance. Get Crosby, get Arco, get quality swivels. Some people don't bother with swivels. It just keeps the chain from twisting up as you spin around. It tries to twist up. Sometimes it gets twisted up so bad it can't get into it won't lay in the gypsy right and you have trouble getting it in. Some people swear they never have that issue. They've never put a swivel on before. They're not going to now. They don't have the issue. I had one on. I'd left it on. So it's whatever you choose. And then in the bow locker, I have 200 feet of half-inch 3-strand twisted and 200 feet of 5/8 half-inch 3-strand twisted. And then in the stern locker, with the kedges on the rail, the stern crushes 300 feet of half-inch with 50 feet of chain. And then a second anchor, I have a 35-pound CQR right below me in the bow locker that I can grab. So, and then the Fortress on the stern. I want to get Fortress anchors also covered real nice. In fact, let's go look at one. Sorry for the wind. I'll be out of it in a second if I can avoid falling over. So the nice thing with the Fortress anchor, one, it's aluminum, it's light. You have to have chain on this. It will not set. It will not vary. It'll just skip. Oh, they're firing the cannon over before. It will just skip across the ground unless you have chain on it to pull it down at the bottom. The brilliant thing with the Fortress is you can see, I guess you can't really from here, but there's spots where it's bolted together. All those bolts do, like here, all those bolts do is hold the fittings together. All the strain is on the actual hardware. It's not on the bolts itself. The bolts are just facilitating keeping everything together. But that's what I mean by the Fluke Fortress Danforth style. Makes a great kedge anchor. That thing weighs about 8 pounds. I cannot break it free of the bottom by hand. I have to use a winch. I cannot pull it out of the bottom by myself. Weighs like 12 pounds. Throw it in the dinghy, throw all the line in, row it out, set it, row back over, haul myself off the dock or out of off the bottom.
And especially, after it's been set for a few days, because
oh yeah,
that's not going nowhere.
No, you're never getting that sucker out. Not by hand. Not without a winch. So, I think that's anchoring.
Okay. What do you have anything about, if you got, I mean, this is more for me because I've got a lighter boat, but if you've got wind that's opposed to the tide in an anchorage.
Wind against tide, yep. That's what I'm in right now. So I think I leaned over and showed you. I'm sitting over top of my anchor and chain right now. Mm-hmm. With my boat, because I draw 6 feet, I've got a lot of underwater profile. My boat stays nose into the tide. So right now I'm pointed like all the other boats are. I'm nose into the tide, but the wind has blown me over top of my anchor and chain. So I'm sitting on the south end of my chain like I would be hanging from, nose pointed north, but I'm nose pointed south, riding over top of it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And some boats will do that. We want to, power boats tend to hang to the wind more than the tide because they don't have as much underwater to hold them. Same with catamarans. They tend to hang to the wind rather than the tide. Sometimes they'll hang sideways. I know that in a little bit as this tide slackens up and the wind holds its position, I'll wind up sitting sideways to both. I'll have the wind on one side and the tide on the other, and I'll just kind of be hanging sideways, kind of at the end of my road. Excuse me.
Well, yeah, but I mean, in terms of, like if you're getting, is there anything to do about like if you're getting hit, like with tidal stuff, like on the beam or something? Basically, just how to make that kind of thing more comfortable. I think that's a good part of my problem.
Oh, in terms of making sure you stay nose onto the tide or nose onto the wind. If you've got more above water surface than below, you can set a riding sail like the trawlers sometimes do. If you have a mizzen, you can set the mizzen and sheet it flat. If you've got more underwater than above, I know I've locked the helm over to port to kind of keep, or to starboard, one way or the other, just to help keep the nose up into the wind, or into the tide rather. So you could set a drogue or something. You'd want to set it on a short line, on a really short line, so that people don't, go behind you coming into anchor and go across it. You could do something like that to try and keep your nose into the current, into the tide. Sometimes if if you're in a narrow channel or something, the tide's always going one direction or the other. You could some people will bow and stern anchor, kind of keep nose or stern into the tide. You want, for your stern anchor, if you're doing that, you want you want good strong points to attach everything to, because it's going to be a lot of load on the stern. Is not very pointy on most boats, and so it's a little extra force than the bow. And if you get wind and current starts coming from if one current's on the nose and the other's kind of on the quarter, and the wind starts coming funny, it can get real rolly or put a lot of strain on stuff. So generally, deal with it. Is the picking off, or suck it up, buttercup.
Okay.
If you're rolling real bad, some people swear by flopper stoppers, like poor brain damage guy. Whereas I think Reggae's used them, and she was not a fan of them and hasn't had any, so they didn't really have any effect. Too much of a pain in the ass to be worth it.
Yeah, I think the wind generator that I got made me more susceptible to rolling, so I'll have to see what I can do about that.
Extra weight aloft. Just put another 10 pounds in the bilge. And always, of course, questions and whatnot, and diagrams. Fatty Goodlander and Lynn and Larry Party both have books on anchoring. Fatty especially has one called Creative Anchoring. That I think is very good.
All right. Thanks a lot, Ethan.
Bye,
Thank you much. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.